Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, I'm happy to welcome you here today in Bucha, on the free Ukrainian soil here in Bucha. Kiev Oblast was the first region from which the Ukrainian defenders were able to push the occupiers, the first region that was liberated from the Russian occupier. Overall, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we keep repeating the word "for the first time." It is for the first time since World War II on the European continent one nation has carried out an unprovoked and unjustified act of aggression against another nation. After Kiev Oblast was liberated, it was the first time that we saw the real beastly face of the regime that for decades has proclaimed to be civilized, even though they have acted in the opposite manner, disrespecting and violating all norms of the international law. This guise of civilization disappeared when on the streets of the liberated Bucha, we, just like the entire world, saw the bodies of regular civilians killed and shot dead. The vehicles that were destroyed was the bodies of women and children, the torture chambers where people were tortured and killed just for the fact that they are Ukrainian. Homes destroyed on purpose, and their residents for whom their homes have become graves. And we're not even talking about looting that was omnipresent. It is for the first time that the Russian occupiers were probably able to see the world that was geographically close to them, but so different in terms of values and mentality. And like real barbarians, they started to destroy and loot this new world. It is symbolic and it is scary that many of those who have suffered from the crimes of the aggressor has faced the Russian horde for not the first time. In these cozy districts of Kiev Oblast, the internally displaced individuals from Ukrainian Donbass often resided who were forced to leave their homes after the Russian occupation that started in 2014. Those people started everything from scratch. They had the dream to have a new life. Those dreams were crushed by the violent regime. As a result of the Russian invasion, a plane called the Dream Mriya was destroyed here, nearby, in the Hostomel airport in the very first days of the war. Back then, due to the bravery of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, the attack was repelled. These battles changed the way of the war. They saved the country and saved Kiev. A year ago, at the beginning of April, people started returning to their homes. People started to rebuild their homes, to heal the mental wounds, and to try to go back to peaceful life. I will never stop being surprised at the bravery and the kindness of Ukrainians together supporting each other. They're going through the horrors of the war and they have enough willpower to keep living, to keep working, to keep creating. And we will also rebuild the dream plane that we had once. What can we do for these wonderful people and to commemorate those who are not here with us today, whose lives were taken by this war? Our duty as representatives of the law is to restore justice, to bring justice. This is exactly why we have to come together and to rebuild the international justice architecture that was destroyed by the aggressor, just in the same ways that Ukrainians rebuilt their liberated homes. Not just for Ukraine and Ukrainians. The answer to the question of accountability of Russian perpetrators is the answer to the question: In which world will our children live? Once again, this is not just for Ukrainians. In Ukraine, this is for all of our children who want to live in the civilized world, in the world where the rule of law is prevalent, in the world where the dignity, justice, and state borders are sovereign. Or do you want them to live in the world of brute force where dictators can launch wars against their peaceful neighbors? Throughout this year, here in Kiev, many friends and allies have held their visits. They saw with their own eyes the consequences of the Russian crimes. We are united in understanding that this massacre shall never be repeated, neither in Ukraine nor anywhere in the world. We do not have the right to let impunity win. And a significant condition for that is individual accountability of the highest military and political leadership of the aggressor state for the gravest international crimes.
Your Excellencies, I want to say some words especially for you. We are very grateful for international community, international organizations, partner institutions and states for standing with us in our quest for justice and accountability. Due to your support, first time in history, international crimes are being documented and investigated in real time, accumulating unprecedented amount of evidence. We are equally grateful for civil society, media, and ordinary citizens that are also engaged in documenting facts. We also commend and applaud survivors and witnesses for their courage to speak up, for their courage to remember and reflect on emotionally sensitive issues and scenes. Last but not least, let me also express gratitude to my colleagues, the prosecutors and investigators. Without their efforts, we would have been far behind in our quest for justice and accountability. Gathered information has allowed us to trace the patterns of international crimes committed by Russia and its proxies. We see it as a deliberate strategy to destroy Ukraine as a state and Ukrainians as a nation, along with massive display of war crimes. Many of these atrocities have been committed here in Bucha, and thus it bears the hallmark of genocide. I truly hope all this evidence will result in unprecedented results, justice being served, and perpetrators being held accountable in Ukrainian as well as before international courts and tribunals. We have recently witnessed the historical decision of the International Criminal Court. Arrest warrants for Russian President Putin and the regime's Commissioner for Children's Rights, Lvova Belova. As stated by President Zelensky, it must be followed by historic responsibility. Today, we have an opportunity to discuss the available, operational, and desired means to ensure a comprehensive web of accountability for international crimes, for all the victims and survivors, for the lasting peace and stability in Ukraine, in Europe, and worldwide. Dear friends, let's get to work. Thank you.